Wow, I pushed the record button before I even decided what I was going to talk about. Um, yes, this is me without a wig. I am out in the middle of Baden Lake campgrounds. I felt the need to go out for a walk to get away from my dwelling / workplace. And actually, one of the reasons I wanted to leave was to make more videos in a different setting. Because when I see each video of mine in the same setting, even for me that gets old, and I don't know how it would be for a viewer seeing me in that same room with all the junk in it. Not junk, but the stuff that it's only junk because I don't want it in the videos. That's what I mean by junk. But I like to get out in general to nature. I feel more connected. I've talked about connection in a recent video, and being out in nature, I don't feel connected to a person necessarily. I just feel more connected internally, if that makes sense. I feel like I'm more in I'm not so much in the alien planet. I think the world of humanity, for me, kind of increases that feeling of being an alien. That I maybe, instead of talking about like one of the predetermined topics I had to talk about, I might just go on a rant out of nowhere. We'll see. But yeah, I feel something when I'm out here in the. I don't know, can you hear the birds? I hear the birds. There's pretty much nothing around me. There's nothing around me. There's no. When I say nothing, I mean like there's no civilization. I'm very sweaty. I don't know if you can see it. Anyways, I do think of myself as a religious person, a spiritual person. I am on a spiritual quest. I don't know how much into that I want to talk. But I do believe that people have a connection with God, or they can have a connection with God. And I'm very curious about that. Very curious is not even the word I'm looking for. It's more fascinated, compelled. But my trans search actually relates to my spiritual search. I think if I were not on a spiritual search, I probably would still be denying the trans identity. So I go off on a little bit of a tangent here. This is I make a connection, or I don't make the connection. I kind of state that there was a connection between trans and studying esoteric stuff, and I don't really go into that connection. I just kind of skip ahead to all the esoteric stuff that I've studied. There wasn't really anything in esoteric stuff that I studied, or even in religion in general, that convinced me that I was trans, or kind of had anything to do with me thinking that I was trans, but it did encourage me to try cross-dressing. There are two things in particular. Two things. One of them. Where's the fucking lens? One of them was a warning that I saw on an esoteric website. I don't remember the name of the website. It might have been something like esoteric.com. Maybe it was just a generic website for esoteric stuff. It had multiple, I believe it had multiple kind of forums or maybe just pages. But there was, I remember I was kind of going through it and I see this warning. I think it was like just a poster type, not an ad, but it was almost in like just kind of off to the side. And it said, "Do not join occult schools that require you to cross-dress. Cross-dressing is not required to attain enlightenment." And do not join occult schools that require you to cross-dress. Cross-dressing is not required to attain enlightenment. What does that mean? What does cross-dressing have to do with enlightenment? Why would anyone even think that cross-dressing was at all related to enlightenment? These are the sorts of things that I was thinking when I read that. At that time, I was just beginning to study transgender stuff. I was in Charlotte. I had just gotten out of school at the Art Institute, and I don't know what's wrong with me right now, but I was studying it. I'd either just started studying transgender stuff, or I started studying it maybe a little bit later. This may have actually helped me get me to studying it. And then the other thing, I said there was two. The other thing was the story of Thor. The story of Thor goes, I did mention it once already in another video, maybe even two, that Thor's hammer is stolen by a giant. The giant just basically took his hammer and ran off with it. I don't know the details of why or how it happened, but Thor goes to the other gods to ask for advice, and the other gods tell him, you have to get your hammer back. You are the son of Earth, and your job, your purpose in life is to defend the Earth. You need your hammer to defend the Earth. And so he's like, well, how do I do it? And so they say, the other gods, they say, you have to dress as a woman and go marry the giant who took your hammer. And they didn't give more detail than that. It was pretty much dress as a woman, go marry the giant, and you'll get your hammer back. And so he dresses as a woman. I don't know what kind of things they had back then. I don't know if they had wigs or what. This was from ancient Scandinavia, where cross-dressing was not unusual behavior, especially if you were a shaman and a magic worker, a spiritual healer. And so this may have been relevant to them. But so he dresses as a woman. He borrows Loki's falcon hide and flies off to the giant. And the giant sees the big manly Thor dressed as a woman, and it's love at first sight. And the giant, I don't know if the giant asked Thor to marry him or if Thor asked the giant, but they get married, and the giant takes the hammer and places it in Thor's lap as a wedding gift. And Thor takes the hammer and smashes the giant to pieces. If you're the kind of person who thinks that mythology is meant to be interpreted, that it's not meant to be taken literally, you can do with that what you want. I did with it what I wanted. So that and if I think about where that comes from, I'm not entirely sure, but I used to study, I got into esoteric religion a few years ago, and by esoteric, I mean the stuff that you don't typically hear about in like the mainstream, things like Kabbalah, Freemasonry, the Rosicrucian Order, stuff like that, Gnostic Christianity. I think it was the Da Vinci Code by Dan Brown, the book. I read it when I was in Afghanistan, and I think that was kind of what turned me on to that. I don't remember if I had read the Gnostic Gospels prior to that. I think I read that first, and then that led me to the Gnostic Gospels. And the Gnostic Gospels fascinated me. And if you've studied the Gnostic Gospels, you know that basically they talk about what I just mentioned, that humans have the potential to know God directly, not through a Bible, not through someone else's sermons or speeches, but as a direct experience. And that, I was enthralled by that. I mean, it wasn't like I was blindsided by it, but I was, when I read the Gnostic Gospels, I felt like I have to pursue this. I have to go in this direction. And so that led me to other types of esoteric stuff, like I said, like Kabbalah, which I don't study in depth. I studied it enough to kind of get a concept of what it is, and but then I moved on to other things. Sufism. I read a little bit about esoteric Taoism, which is called, I believe it's called Nidon or Nadin. I think Nidan. I think, I can't remember. It's been a while since I read the book. I had one book, and it was so confusing, so just convoluted and just gibberish almost, that I couldn't make sense of it. But it said that in the very beginning of the book. It basically acknowledged that this was an esoteric book, which meant in that case, at least in the case of that book, that you had to have a teacher. That if you did not have a someone who'd already been kind of initiated in that you would have, that you wouldn't be able to read the book, and I couldn't make sense of it. But apparently, that's kind of what esoteric is, by the definition that I use. I hear people talk about esoteric a lot, and they'll use it to refer to things like aliens and reptile people leading the country and stuff like that. But for me, I use it totally in the context of religion. How I learned it, I think that when I actually learned about the word esoteric, that was the context that I learned it in, was in religion. And so I learned that there was exoteric and esoteric, and exoteric would be stuff like Christianity, Islam, Judaism, Buddhism, the things that you hear about kind of as a kid, that are put out into public freely. They're not necessarily hidden. Now, Kabbalah is not hidden. Freemasonry is not hidden. But if you look at something like Freemasonry, who knows that Freemasonry is a religion? Does the average person know that Freemasonry is even a religion, or do they think of it as a social club? If they think of it as a social club, that means that, it's, as the Freemasons put it, it is hidden in plain sight. But yeah, so esoteric is presented in my studies as kind of if exoteric is high school, esoteric is college. Yeah. So that is kind of how I see it, and that was what I got into. And a lot of the stuff that I've read has totally fascinated me, and I'm very much interested in this spiritual search. And that is one of the reasons why I come out here into the wilderness. I'm not doing it just because Jesus did it, because Jesus went into the wilderness before he began his, what you might call his life as Jesus, I guess. Of course, he was Jesus before that, but not really, right? It wasn't until after that he began his ministry. I think that's how the Bible puts it, that he began his ministry after his time in the wilderness. Yeah, this is definitely kind of a rant. This is not so much totally did not think about this before I started. But there is a kind of music out here that I don't perceive when I'm in the city. I almost feel like I should bring my guitar and my drum out here, because I feel like if I could pick a perfect spot to make music, it would be out here. Because I feel like the nature would give me music that I couldn't give myself. But yeah, I just wanted to share that part about myself. I don't necessarily want to go too deep into that, but that is something about me. I'm telling you that because if you're into that kind of thing and you want to talk to me about that, that is certainly something we can talk about. So what else? I was thinking about that on the way up here, on my walk to this spot. I mean, after I got out of the truck and I started hiking, my thoughts went to my work situation. My work situation is, when I'm referring to a specific aspect of my work, which is the fact that I work for my father, and he is close to retirement, and he's like 69 years old, and he has started the pool company. I don't want to go too much in the details, but he started the company 15 years ago. I was there when he started it, but because of different things, I was in and out of the company several times. I think the first time I left was to go to college at the Art Institute, which I've mentioned in other videos. I left. I came back after that. I tried to stay in Charlotte, and I had a roommate, but he moved out. And when he moved out, I could not afford to stay there anymore, so I came back to Salisbury. My dad offered me a job. I came back to work for him for another little while, and then I think it was shortly after that I had my trans discovery, and I continued to work for him for a little while, but it started to cause a problem for him. The problem, as he put it, was that I was not at work, that my mind was elsewhere, which was entirely true. I think he described it as something like you have one foot in the door and one foot out the door. Or maybe that was the way I described it. I don't remember, but so I ended up leaving again. And it was because of an argument. We got into an argument at work. And the argument centered on the trans issue. He and my brother were there. The argument lasted. I got to work at 7 o'clock that day. The argument started almost as soon as I got there, and basically it started off with him basically saying that he thought I should go get a job somewhere else, and then it turned into an argument about the trans issue, and we argued from 7 o'clock until 2 o'clock in the afternoon, at which point I was just so frustrated and just fed up that I think I just, I don't remember if I yelled at him or something like that. But he basically told me to go home and not come back the next day. And he didn't say you're fired. What he said was don't come back tomorrow, which I wasn't sure if he meant take the day off or if he meant take the rest of your life off. But I didn't ask. After that, I basically I went back to my apartment. And you know what? I'm telling the story wrong, because that was what led me to move to Atlanta. That incident that I just mentioned, that was what led me to move to Atlanta. So it was actually when I came back, because I went and got a job somewhere else on my own. Before that, I had gone to work at a landscaping company nearby, and it was not a very good job. So I went and got a job somewhere else. No, I take that back. my history, my memory is a little bit. I don't know if it's just old age or what, but I got a job at a lumber yard building pallets, and I actually got fired from that job. And when I started that one, I did tell them about the trans situation. I came out to my employer, not my employer, sorry, I came out to the supervisor. He was not necessarily the person who hired me, but I came out to him, talked to him about my situation. And I don't know if that had anything to do with it, but they did have a technical reason to fire me, which was that they had a punch-in clock system where you go up to this machine and you put your finger on it and you clock in and out through that. And it did not matter what time you arrived to work. All that mattered is what time you put your finger on that clock. So even if I got to work 5 minutes early, but when I put my finger on the clock, it was 1 minute late, that counts as me being late. And that happened quite a few times. There were a number of times when I got to work early, but was still considered late. And they do it on a point system. They came to me and said, you have so many points that we have to let you go. And that's when I went and got the job at the landscaping company. And like I said, it was not a good job, so I went and got a job at a greenhouse, a very large greenhouse, and I liked that job a lot. But it was a temp job. It was because it was a greenhouse. What they would do is they would hire like 1,000 people, maybe several thousand, and they would hire them at the beginning of the season, and then as I don't know how long they did it for, but after a while, I don't know if it was even after a while, but every month they would lay off more and more and more until they got to the end of the season, at which point they would hire as permanent the people who were the best employees. And I came out to them too. I talked to them about my situation. I don't know if that had anything to do with me not being hired as a permanent employee. If I had been hired as a permanent employee, I probably would still be working there. Just because I did really like that job. The people there, that was the first place I've ever worked where I wore women's clothes at work. I wore makeup. I wore women's shirts. I did try wearing wigs for a little while, but wearing wigs at a place like that was just totally an obstruction to work. I mean, the hair was constantly getting in my face. With wigs, I see no point in putting a wig back in a ponytail because it really defeats the purpose of wearing a wig, I think. For me, it does anyways. But like I said, that was temp. I did make it all the way to the end. I was there to the very last layoff, but I got let go in the very last layoff. And like similar to the other job, I don't know if that had anything to do with the trans issue. It did cause problems for some people, especially the men who worked there. There were a lot of women who worked there, especially Mexican women, and they actually seemed to love it. I would show up in women's clothing, and the Mexican women just thought that was fantastic. They would be cheering for me and things like that. I thought someone was behind me. And but yeah, so I because when I left that job, I went back to work for my dad again, and that's I don't think it was how long, I can't remember how long it was from that point until the point that we had the argument, at which point I moved to Atlanta. So I went to Atlanta for 4 years, and I struggled. I didn't. The Atlanta trip might be that could be its own video, but I basically went there with $300 in my bank account, 2 days worth of clothes, some books, like 35 pounds of books. I think I weighed the bag because it was quite heavy. It was all esoteric religious stuff, books on Kabbalah and Gnosticism and stuff like that. And before I went, I did Google searches on things like transgender, esoteric religion. I figured if there was going to be any kind of groups for me in Atlanta, or any groups around, it would be in Atlanta. And there were groups all over the place, spiritual groups, Buddhists, Sufi, Kabbalists, Rosicrucian, all those things, which is one of the reasons I wanted to go there. But there were also transgender groups. I did not have a car. I did not have a job lined up when I went, so I basically just hopped on a bus and was immediately homeless when I got off the bus. Actually, I started on the train, if you want to be, correct. I started off on the train and then transferred to a bus in Charlotte, which was a kind of a scary experience, walking from the train station to the bus station at 3 o'clock in the morning in downtown Charlotte. That was its own adventure. But I am going to come back to the work situation. The trip in Atlanta was basically 4 years of, the first year was basically me just trying to find a place to live and get a job. I stayed in homeless shelters. Fortunately for me, probably one of the best benefits of me going to the Army was the fact that I now get veterans benefits. And one of those benefits is that if you're homeless, the VA pays for you to stay in homeless shelters, because that was something I did not realize, is that if you're homeless, you have to pay to stay in a shelter. And it's usually something cheap. It's like $10 a day, which is not bad. But if you don't have a job, what are you going to do? So the first year was me basically just looking for a place to stay and get a job. But it was also, the first year was the most adventurous part of the trip. Because once I got a job and a place to stay, the adventure pretty much came to an end almost. But I really don't want to go too much into that. I would like to, but I kind of feel like that should be its own video. I mean, that could take me an hour just to talk about that trip to Atlanta, and maybe I will do that. Just because I haven't really talked to anybody about it. I mean, I don't talk to my family about it because there's too many trans stuff to mention in that, and they don't want to talk about that stuff. But after 4 years, the pandemic started, 2020. At that time, I had been working at the VA hospital. The VA was not just taking care of me as far as homeless shelters went, but I got into an apartment that was for veterans. It was a government subsidized housing. It's like Section 8, but it was specifically for veterans. And it was also specifically for veterans who had been homeless and either had a substance abuse problem or a mental illness, which I had all three. Though I don't know if borderline personality disorder qualifies for their services. But the pandemic started. I had left the VA because I wanted to work at Starbucks, because Starbucks is a trans-friendly place. That was one reason. The other reason was, what was it? I think that might have been it. Because when I was working at the VA, when I left, I was working in a warehouse and it was all men. It also happened to be all black men. I was the only white person working in the warehouse, which was a little bit uncomfortable. But it wasn't the sort of place where I wanted to take hormones. I went to Atlanta to explore my transgender identity and possibly start transitioning. And I did not want to do that working in that kind of environment that was just that masculine heavy environment where acting tough and acting like you're in charge all the time. I mean, it's like every guy in that place thought he was the boss. And it's the same now where I work. it's like every guy there just either thinks he's the boss or wants to be the boss. Nobody wants to be on the bottom. There are, as they say, what is it? What's the saying? Too many chiefs and not enough Indians. That's how it was there, and that I didn't want to be in that because, for one, I feel like I would be a target as far as someone trying to be the boss, because I feel like someone would see that being trans is automatically the inferior position, that which is how I feel where I work now. But they were quite friendly. I used to wear makeup to that job, and I couldn't wear women's clothing because I had to wear a uniform, but I would wear bracelets, women's bracelets, stuff like that. So I left that part primarily because I was considering transitioning, I believe. I don't remember all my thoughts at the moment. But how long has this been going? 12 minutes? That's nothing. And so I got the job at Starbucks, and probably I wasn't even there a year. I don't know the exact amount of time, but after I got the job at Starbucks, the housing place that I was in, the organization that managed that subsidized housing thing, it was just like they were renting basically 27 apartments in an apartment complex, which was much larger than 27 apartments. It was like, I don't know, 300 or 400 apartments, but that organization had rented 27 of those, and like I had my own apartment, but they changed the management. It had been run by St. Jude's, and St. Jude's gave up on it, and I don't know if they sold it or just passed it off to someone else or what, but a new organization took over, and when they did, they decided they didn't want us living in that apartment complex because it was too expensive, and so they moved us somewhere else outside Atlanta, which really for me defeated the purpose of me being there, because one of the reasons I was in Atlanta was to be in a safe place for trans. So they moved us out to Stone Mountain, which was not, first of all, it was not a safe place, period. I mean, Stone Mountain has the highest crime rate of any, as far as I know, any area in Atlanta, and that, I believe, is partly because there was so much government subsidized housing in the area. Wherever you have government subsidized housing, you tend to have quite a bit of crime. Or wherever maybe I should say wherever you have poor people, you tend to have a lot of crime. And like I remember when we moved to that place, there was a gas station kind of by the entrance to the apartment complex that had bullet holes in the windows. And in my entire lifetime, I've never stopped at a gas station that had bullet holes in the window. I mean, where I come from, I don't even know of a grocery store that's ever been robbed. I mean, maybe they have, and they just didn't tell people. But it was there certainly wasn't something I heard about. Where I lived, that probably would be something that I would have heard about. Where I live now, I mean. So there was that. I didn't really like that. I did not want to live in that place. Like I said, for one, it was outside of Atlanta city limits. It wasn't so far that I couldn't get to Atlanta via the MARTA system that Atlanta has. Atlanta has that MARTA public transportation system. And but to get to work at Starbucks where I had the job, I had to take 2 buses to get there. And I had to walk 30 minutes to get to the first bus stop, and which meant that the entire trip took about 2 hours on bus, and it was only 8 miles away. So taking 2 hours to get to work, and very often being late because either one bus would be late or I would be late because whatever reason, maybe it took me longer than 30 minutes to walk to the bus stop or something, I don't know. But it just turned into a disaster. Starbucks was getting angry with me, frustrated, because prior to that I'd been always on time, but that's because prior to that move, I lived walking distance from the Starbucks, which is one of the reasons I wanted to work there. I didn't have a car the entire time I was in Atlanta. And so there was no Starbucks in Stone Mountain. There was another Starbucks There were other Starbucks in Atlanta, but it was the same. It would have been the same issue. I would have had to take, multiple buses to get to them. And then the pandemic started around that same time. I mean, I was only in that apartment, the new apartment, for maybe like 3 days when I called my dad up because he had offered me a job a year or so prior to that. He said that he wanted someone to do his online media marketing type stuff, his Facebook management, what do you call it, social media management. At that time I told him, I said, I can do all that from Atlanta. I don't even need to move back to Salisbury to do that for you, because that's all stuff I can do on my computer. But that's not really what he wanted. And he wanted me to move back. I'm not entirely sure why. I don't know if it's just because he missed me, or because he was not he knew what I was doing in Atlanta, and he just wasn't he knew that I wouldn't be doing it back in Salisbury. I don't know. But he offered me that job then, and when he said that he would only give it to me if I moved back, I said no thank you. And so, but when the pandemic started and I was having all these troubles like getting to work, Starbucks basically on the verge of firing me, I called him up and asked him if that job was still available. So this was I guess if I remember correctly, this would be the 4th time that I've worked for him. And so I came back, and that was in 2020. So it's been about a year and a half that I came back. And now when I came back, there were much more people working for him than there was when I left. I've mentioned, I don't know if I mentioned it in this video, but when I left, it was just him and my brother and I working. And when I came back, he had about 6 guys working for him. And just that made me not want to work there. When I found that out, I was like, I don't know if I want to be in that kind of environment when I'm going through this trans search, struggle for self-acceptance thing. And he was like, no, they're all nice guys and that kind of thing. And I would say that's kind of I guess maybe nicer than some people for sure. So once I came back, though, the issue of his retirement kind of was starting to kind of it came up more than once when I was talking to different people. My dad mentioned it himself. He said something like, I need to retire here pretty soon. And his wife said something to me about him retiring, which means because he basically runs the company, there's the question of who is going to run the company when he leaves. So this is the work situation, basically, that I started off talking about. And currently there are myself, 2 of my brothers working there, and then the other, right now there are, counting, so me, my 2 brothers, and then 4 other guys who work there. And so you might assume, and I might assume, that he would give the company when he retires to one of his children. Now I like to think that it would be me, just because I am the oldest, but that's not a good enough reason, really, in my own opinion. And I like to think that because it would be kind of humiliating to work for one of my younger brothers, which is something that I don't really like the prospect of. And well, that's something I may have to face. But yeah, so either I would assume that he would give it to one of his children, but that's not necessarily the case, because he did hire a guy who was he already has experience in management. He is very, I would say he's the most mature person he has working for him, not counting myself, and that's just because I don't want to really compare myself to the guy. But if there is one thing advantage that he does have over me, is that he has a normal life. That he is I'm not going to say he's straight. But he is married to a woman. He does have kids, and he is a kind of what do you want to call it? Kind of the image that you would want as an employer. Now, at work, I don't present as female. I don't wear makeup to work. I don't wear women's clothing. That was one of the conditions that he made when he hired me, is that I would not do that. And because I wanted the job, I accepted that. But also because after working at Starbucks and wearing makeup, I kind of felt like I didn't really need to wear makeup to work. I felt like work was money, and it's not. It's not my life. I have my life to wear makeup, and I have work to make money. And but that is its own situation too, because right now my work is my life. Where I live, I don't have a life outside of work. When work is over, I'm basically by myself, because I don't really know where to go. I don't. That is something I've also talked about in other videos, so I don't want to repeat too much. But I don't have, like, I might have to try, bite the bullet and try going to church to meet people, because I don't want to go to bars. I may have to go to bars too, but I don't want to do that. One is because I'm struggling with the getting off of alcohol. With church, I've had mixed experiences with churches. In Atlanta, there were plenty of churches for LGBT people, and where I live, there are no churches who advertise, at least, that they are LGBT supportive. So, which is, in Atlanta, if you're an LGBT church, usually it's advertised, like it'll say on your website or whatever, or so I have no life outside of work, and which poses its own problem, and it is a work-related problem, because it's almost to the point where I feel the need to get a job somewhere else. There is a Starbucks here, and I'm considering getting a job at the Starbucks here, because Starbucks is by the company's policies, trans-friendly, LGBT-friendly. They do not, at least as hiring goes, they do not discriminate. They have a zero tolerance policy as far as harassment. It goes for all employees. I mean, you can't harass employees at a Starbucks. Yeah. So I at the moment, I'm not even entirely sure that I want to continue working there. One of the reasons that I want to work there is because it's the best job I've ever had. Doing the digital media marketing stuff is not a job I've ever had. Every job I've had has been a stupid manual labor job, pretty much. Or like me working at a cash register. Like the greenhouse job was just manual labor. The landscaping, all these jobs that I mentioned, those were all manual labor. Basic, mindless, menial, mundane. The 3 M's. I have never liked the job I've had, and this is the first job I've had that I actually liked. The work environment itself is not so much something that I like. The work environment is if it were a stupid manual, mindless, mundane job that I were doing, I probably would not be working there, just because of the work environment. And that is just because I don't want to be around in that environment where, like I said, everybody there wants to be the boss. And because I don't really feel the need to be the boss. In some ways, I feel like I should be the boss, but I don't go around telling people what to do. And that's because I believe in do unto others as you would have them do unto you, which means I don't want you telling me what to do, so I'm not going to tell you what to do. If I were the boss, I would, but that's because I'm the boss. And if you're not the boss, there's really no reason for you to be telling me what to do. But that, that happens quite often. But it's not even just the being bossy; it's the whole thing of trying to put people beneath you. That I have a hard time with, that I struggle with. There's a guy who works there. There are several guys who work there who like to pick, and in their mind, they're just playing, and maybe they are just playing. It's hard for me to say, because because of my lack of self-esteem, I have a hard time distinguishing between people being playful and people being manipulative. But in most cases, I see it as picking. The picking that I endure at work is not playful. I see it as an attempt to basically, it's pecking. So picking is like pecking, right? And when animal, who is it that pecks? It's chickens. When chickens peck, it is basically their way of saying you're beneath me, right? And so picking in that case that's what I see it as, basically, because they're not attempting to be my friend. They're not coming to me and asking me, how are you doing? How's your wife and kids? Is that a joke? I don't have a wife and kids. But I take it as, I don't take it as them being playful, because they're in general they're not friendly. And when I say they're not friendly, I mean, like I said, like they don't make attempts to have like conversations. And I mean, sometimes they'll be like, how are you doing? What's going on? Sometimes they do that, but it's usually, if we have a talk, it might only be like 5 minutes, and then they're kind of like, all right, well, it's certainly not the sort of thing where we're like buddies, where we hang out after work and that kind of thing. And that is another issue that I'll talk about in my video on my relationships with men. Hey, look, the sun's peeking through the trees. And so there is a question for me of kind of whether these guys respect me. I would say that I do have a chip on my shoulder, or I already come into the game with a kind of inferiority complex. Part of that's just from my life, my experiences with people, all my failed relationships. And of course there is the trans issue, which doesn't can sometimes make me feel like I am inferior. But so this question of who is going to be in charge, because my dad has not talked to me about that. He may have talked to other people there about that. But yeah, I don't really. I mean, if he retires, there is the question of, am I going to continue working there? Because if one of my younger brothers gets the job, that may be too much for me. It may be too much for my ego, for one. But also, I don't know if I mean, I can hardly stand working for my dad, and he, in my opinion, is a much better boss than my brothers would be. And no, it's not an attack against them. I just, I mean, my dad I have the best relationship with, of all the people in my family, I have the best relationship with him. And so I think that's kind of what I'm talking about. It's not about like whether they can do the job or whether they know the job. It's more about the relationship that I have, because I suspect it could just be a fear that if they get in charge of me, that they're going to use that as an opportunity to put me beneath them, not just in the work environment. And that is kind of the situation, I guess. And of course, there is the question of whether I could be in charge. I don't think he would. So there is one of the brothers has been there for the entire 15 years. The other one who works there has not. He's kind of like me. He's been in and out of the company. Between the two of us, I think I've worked there the most. But I don't know if my dad would let me take over the company just because of the trans issue. I don't. He has made it clear that he does not want that kind of associated with the company. He's made it clear that he doesn't want me wearing makeup or dressing as a woman at work. And it is kind of, at least where I live, I don't know how many people know about it, but even his neighbors know about it. I don't know how they heard about it, but when I came out, the word spread around town. I don't know how much of town knows about it, but it's not a secret. And should I turn? Which is the best? Let's see what happens if I turn this way. My butt is getting sore from sitting on this log. The log up my butt. So yeah, that's the situation, and I'm kind of like, there are other options. It doesn't have to be either me being in charge or me being under. me being on top or me being under. But because it is possible that I could go into business for myself. I don't really like that angle because now my head looks kind of off. But because when I was in Atlanta, I did actually come up with an idea to start my own company, which was a design company, which is what I do for my father. I basically design stuff, and mostly I do other stuff too. I apply for permits. I do evaluations of customers' property. So in a way, I'm already doing kind of administrative stuff, but that doesn't mean that he would give me the job. But there are the other guys there could also do that job. Some of them probably he would not let do that job. But the company that I wanted, I never really started it in the sense that I actually did business. I mean, I came up with a logo and a name and that kind of thing, and kind of tried to define what my company would do. I mean, it is a design company, but there are different things you could design. I mean, some people design furniture, some people design houses, some people design, I don't know, logos. Not everybody designs the same stuff, but so my company was not totally very well defined as far as what it would do. And so right now, what I'm thinking is that because what I would like to do is to design people's pool projects, landscaping, home improvement projects, stuff like that. If someone wanted to build a gazebo or make some kind of adjustment in their yard with a pool and a waterfall, or maybe just some kind of creation. Maybe they want some kind of shrine in their backyard that nobody's ever seen before, and they want me to design it for them. That is the sort of thing that I would like to do. Now, if I were in charge of this company, my dad's company, I could do that, but I could also do that for my own company, and then subcontract my dad's company for some of the work. In that case, I would have to become a general contractor, and to my knowledge, at the moment, my dad is the only general contractor who works for his company, which means that if he gives the company to one of my brothers, they will have to become a general contractor, or even the other guys who work for him, they would have to become a general contractor, because someone there has to be a general contractor in order to get permits. So that is something that I'm thinking about. I've already actually purchased the general contractor's book so that I can study for the test, and I would take the test whether I work for him or I work for myself, and I think that option might actually be better, to work for myself, because if I work for myself, the trans issue is not an issue. If I work for myself, I can wear whatever I want. I can go to a customer's house wearing makeup if I want. If they don't want to hire me, they don't have to hire me. And they would not be my father's company's name associated with that. The only association would be the fact that I would subcontract them, or that company, and if I needed them for the project, because I might not need them for the project. I might need another company for the project. Depends on what I'm doing. And so at the moment, I am kind of questioning that. A friend of mine told me that I should just take over the company, but I don't know why my friend would assume that my dad would just give it to me. But ever since my friend said that, that's kind of been in my head. I've been thinking about that ever since he mentioned it. Because prior to that, I don't think I'd even considered it. I had not even considered it as a possibility. And even though when my friend said that, I was like, that'll never happen. My other brother's been there for the entire 15 years. Of course, he would get it, but I'm not so sure that he would. And that's just because even though he knows the process of what they do, he doesn't do a lot of the other administrative stuff. He doesn't seem to want to do a lot of the other administrative stuff, especially if it involves computers. And so, I mean, it could be possible that if he did take over the company, that I would basically continue doing a lot of the administrative stuff, and that he would just continue doing what he's doing, which is he would basically just be in charge of the installations, which is what my dad basically does. My dad does not do a lot of administrative stuff. He does do it, but not at work. He does it at home. But when he's 9 through 5, he's out at the job site, making sure everything is done right, which is not something that I want to do. Which is another one of the reasons that I don't really know that I want to take over the company, because I don't want to do what he does. I certainly don't want to be out at the job site from 9 to 5 every day, or sometimes they do, 9 to 7. I feel like I don't have enough. I already feel like I don't have a life, and I don't know that I would have even less of a life if I did that. But who knows? Sometimes work is life, and I think if I found my life's purpose, even if it is work, that would be life. But yeah, so I've been thinking about it for the last couple days recently, because one of my brothers tried to tell me how to do my job, and I was thinking, is he my dad tell him something like he's going to be in charge or something? Because I didn't understand why he felt the need to tell me how to do my job, but that made me quite angry that he did that, and the thought that I might be working for him one day was disturbing. It was and it almost disturbing to the point where I almost feel like I just can't let that happen. And I've thought about it. I don't know if I could continue working there if I had to work for him. That one in particular. The other one too, I'm not entirely sure. I think it would be very difficult. And that is, like I said, just because I feel like that would be an opportunity for them. They would take that as an opportunity to kind of get on top of me, in not just work, but in the life in general. Because even my dad does that. He tries to be my boss even outside of work, which he did not do before I worked for him. But yeah, so that is one of the things that has been on my mind for about the last few months, that I kind of want to get it over with. I almost feel like telling my dad, just go ahead and retire, just so I can get this, so we can get past this point, because this is driving me nuts. But then, of course, there's the issue of transition also, because I am here recently. I have been considering taking hormones. I would say more than ever. And I think that's partly because now I am more settled than I was in the past. When I was in Atlanta, I was not settled really at all. My future was constantly uncertain. I felt like my situations were always unstable. The housing thing was kind of unstable. The work thing was unstable a lot of the times. It's like the first job I had was a temp job at the VA. It was not even a job. It was a work program for veterans that they let you work there for like 6 months. So it was just like I didn't really have a sense of permanence. And now I do have more of a sense of permanence. I feel like while I'm not happy where I'm at, I don't feel the need to go anywhere else. Well, I shouldn't say that, because I do sometimes. But yeah, well, yeah, that is the work situation. Is this, for one, it is the It's not even just working for my brothers. I mean, really, there's only one guy who works for him that I think I could stand to work for. And that is the one that I talked about before, who had been in management. He is the most mature person who works there for him, like I said. And I think that he might be the only one that I could work for and not just go to work hating it every minute. Was it just an ego thing working for my? Would it be just an ego thing working for my brothers? Possibly. Could I do it? Possibly. That might be its own spiritual path. You know, if you read spiritual books, you'll see things about the ego and things like that, and that could just be totally an ego thing. And it's possible. I might say that I could do that and make the best of it. So that is sort of the situation that I'm kind of faced with. But if I can tie kind of all these things together, what I was thinking on the hike up here was about the thought that it's not so much about what my dad wants, it is about what God wants. You know, maybe God wants me to be in charge of the company. Maybe God wants me to be working for my brothers. And I feel like that is sort of, I don't know if God actually does that. I don't know if God chooses people to be in charge of a company, or even to be in charge of the United States. I know that I remember reading in the Bible things about God kind of anointing kings, that God kind of chose kings to lead people. God chooses leaders of groups. I think Moses was chosen to lead his people, that sort of thing. So I don't know if God does that, and if God does do that, is it, you know, does God choose the leader of McDonald's, of AT&T? Does God care about AT&T? Maybe God doesn't care about AT&T. I don't know. This is also part of the situation, is trying to kind of, I guess if you don't believe in God, you might say, well, this is a fruitless line of thought. But for me, this is one of the things that, in a way, is similar to my trans search, because in most of my life, I was not living naturally. I was forcing things that were kind of not meant to happen, you might say. And so I would say that if I am trans, then God meant for me to be trans. That's not. I asked the preacher once in one of the churches in Atlanta. Or I didn't ask him. I said that I'm wondering, as far as the trans issue goes, what it is that God wants for me to do. Does God want me to live as a woman? Does God want me to live as a man? And his response was, it's not about what God wants, it's about what you want. Which I was shocked to hear a preacher say. But that's kind of where I'm at now with the work situation. And I was thinking about that on the hike up here. And, like I said, maybe working for my brother maybe that's part of my path. Maybe that is part of me realizing my inner truth. Maybe it's not. How will I know? I don't know. 20 years ago, I didn't know I was trans. I didn't think I was trans. If you had asked me 10 years ago, I would have said that I was not trans. I don't know who I am, which is one of the reasons that Gnosticism, especially when I wouldn't say it's my favorite, but just the name Gnosticism, because the name Gnostic comes from the Greek word for knowledge, and I believe the main kind of what Gnosticism is all about is knowing yourself. I would say I don't know myself. Maybe I'm a natural born follower. Maybe I'm not a natural born leader. But how long has it been? Where am I at? I don't even know, because I did stop, didn't I? So I think that's enough for that right now. All right.